Okay, so we're here with Dee Dee from Dum Dum Girls. How's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited.
So, how's the tour going? Where are you coming from, driving from?
We played New York last night, or Brooklyn. Yeah, it was cool. It was a good show. We dressed up for Halloween last night as well. It just seemed like you should try to milk it, for a couple shows if you can.
So, with that said, what are you dressing as tonight, or is it like a surprise?
Probably a surprise, yeah.
I guess we'll see during this show. So, you like to do covers at your shows? Any Gigi Allen or maybe the Smiths cover tonight?
No.
Also a surprise.
Yeah, we're doing two covers, but neither of those. The Smiths one we retired a while ago, and yeah, the Jabbers song we did recently, very very randomly, but we haven't played that for years.
So, I just have one question for you. This is like a out of nowhere, but I was watching the KXP session, and then during the interview, I remember hearing that you guys formed on 420 in 2008. Were you just joking?
Oh no, I made my MySpace profile page on 420. Yeah, if you look on it, it'll say that. Yeah.
With that said, what's your opinion on the downhill slide of MySpace?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. It was very useful for me when I started. Basically, the first two records I put out were because the record label heard me on MySpace, and Sub Pop signed me off of MySpace as well. So I can't really shit talk it.
I mean, it must be really cool to celebrate your MySpace official date on 420. Do you just like get high and just I don't know?
No, I don't do anything particularly different from what I do the other days. So.
Okay, so let's get right into your latest album, Too True. Okay, I feel like for me at least there was more sonic clarity and with the twangy reverb and all that. Do you think, you know, having three guitars dubbed kind of had to do with that?
I mean, I definitely wanted to make a pop record, still a guitar record, and I kind of saturated the songs with guitar. I'd have a rhythm guitar, I'd have sort of legato guitar leads, and those were things that we've always had in songs. But on this record, I also wanted to add a third element, which was sort of like arpeggiated, textural guitar, a lot of fast stuff. Yeah, it was just how I felt like the songs should be produced. But that's why we ended up getting another guitar player, because there was just too much going on to do it as a four-piece.
So Andrew joined for the third guitar.
Yeah, I brought him into the band to tour Too True.
So and you've been working with Richard Goddard for all your albums, and you guys must have built like a really strong bond.
He's great. I mean, I'm not a very extroverted person, so when I started working with him and his engineer, and then sorry, all my friends just got here. And then when we brought Suna in, it was sort of, initially I was a little stressed out because I didn't know how natural or comfortable it would feel. But it was pretty immediately clear that we would be a good team. And Richard's really enthusiastic. He has great ideas. And he always pushes me to do better, which I appreciate. And I feel like he has an understanding of ways to accomplish that.
Speaking of the whole, being not too extroverted thing, I feel like wouldn't it be kind of like I was wondering what the process is like when you're making the music, because I mean you come up with the ideas and then them present it to the band, right?
I mean, it's varied a little bit over the years, but I typically write the songs and then demo them myself, and then just record with myself and Richard and Suna and Alonso, the engineer. Only in Dreams was I presented the songs to the band, and we learned them as a band, and then recorded like sort of a more traditional live record. But everything else has just been me and my producers.
do you have like a clear idea like when you're presenting the ideas and like how they should, like in terms of textures, how they should sound?
Yeah, I usually have it pretty thought out. I, in the past, have written the songs most often on like an acoustic guitar, so they're in very, sparse format when I start, and then when I demo it, I kind of flesh out the ideas. I usually record a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar if I have an idea, and a bass line, um, and I do like some minor drum programming, but it's usually, with the understanding that it's kind of placeholder. And so then I take those demos into the studio and we work from them and figure out, what's important to maintain and what things should change and stuff like that. Too True, I wrote and demoed at the same time, and I did it electronically instead of, like sitting down with my guitar and writing a song. I was at my computer plugged in with electric guitar, electric bass, or whatever. So it kind of came about more quickly, fully developed. And I think that just had to do with I had a very nagging feeling that the next record needed to be a really cohesive piece of work, and so that's why I felt compelled to sit down and write the whole thing like in a short amount of time, and it's why I sort of established the palette of sounds I was going to use and then applied it, to everything.
You seem to like get work done very quickly. So have you been already working on new material, or do you write on tour?
I write some on tour. It's pretty hard. I usually get little snippets of ideas that I kind of jot down or record little demos of. And then when I get home and I have like the proper time to give them attention, I go back and I kind of just like put it on hold. I've never worried that if I didn't jump on an idea right then that I'd lose it. I kind of have this weird like relationship with my ideas that I can sort of pause them in motion and then come back to them and not feel like I missed any kind of opportunity in terms of the, creative side of things.
You've had some really, terrible moments like leading up to this album, like your mother passing away, and I heard that you were even in the middle of an earthquake and everything. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was like 3 years ago. Was that it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, like everybody, life goes up and then it goes down and then it goes back up. And I think the main thing that I took away from Too True and identified really early on when I was working on it was that, I had been down for quite a while and felt very weighted down by specific things. Felt like I couldn't really get past them. I wasn't able to really write songs about anything other than a few topics because it was just sort of all consuming. But I think when I started, to write Too True, I acknowledged that I felt like I had, moved forward, which was a really liberating feeling, and it was such a relief to be like, oh, okay, I'm back open again. I, could write about anything really if the idea struck me. So it was cool for me.
So it was like a cathartic out outlet, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, but really, I think I'd worked it out prior to writing the record. So it was really just me recognizing that I felt sort of like a blank slate or a new page. I didn't feel like I was tied to stuff that had been sort of, after the after effect was still very much with me.
I realized that you care about aesthetics and visuals, I guess. And so, when I was reading the story about Rainbow Eyes, obviously the story about the your husband's T-shirt
Right.
and all that. So speaking of visuals, how did the album art come about? Because it kind of seemed like with the color pattern and all, it kind of seemed futuristic, and then there's you just with your side.
Yeah. Well, with this record, because I had a lot more time than usual to work on it, I decided that because I felt like the sound had made a pretty noticeable shift, that I wanted to kind of reestablish the aesthetic and have that take the shift with the music. And I brought on my friend Tamron as creative director. She's very visually minded, really smart, and just has great ideas. And so I basically gave her the record and said, "This is." So I basically gave her the record and said, I think it'll be obvious to you that I've made a sonic step forward, and I really want to sort of, I don't want to use the term rebrand because that sounds so commercial, but kind of just reestablish the image, because a lot of times, at least for a band like us, like obviously there's always been a pretty strong aesthetic, but I started anonymously, and the first aesthetic that we established was pretty natural. It was just sort of a dramatic version of my personal style anyway, but it's kind of over the years grown a little bit larger than life. And so sometimes I read, descriptions of us, and I just can't believe it, because to me it sounds like the person isn't even looking or isn't even listening. They're just assuming that sort of this precedent exists, and they don't allow for the fact that I think not only the sound but the image has evolved with time. So I was trying to be like really obvious with it this time, like, hey, look, this is what I am now. But yeah, it definitely, we were trying to do something pop and something contemporary.
Continuing with the whole visuals thing, obviously when I saw the music video for Are You Okay, that was like, I was like, like this is crazy. I mean, obviously working with Brad Easton Ellis, who wrote American Psycho, which is incredibly weirdly chaotically beautiful and amazing. So what was like, did he come up with the whole story, and then like did you get to meet him or anything?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we started working together because he did a movie with my now friend Braxton Pope, who produced. He did The Canyons, that movie, sort of like that new noir thing with James Dean, the porn star, and Lindsay Lohan. And they used a Dum Dum Girls song in the end credits. So that kind of sparked a conversation where, I was just incredibly flattered that, something with his name attached to it, my name was attached to as well. So I reached out and just said, like, I'm a huge fan, and really honored, would jump at the opportunity to, ever do something like this again or whatever. And it kind of became something bigger, where it was like, oh, well, why don't we do a video, but make a short film, really use a song as just almost a minor part in this larger thing, and in this thing that's a format I've never done before. So yeah, initially when I met him, I was a blonde, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but specifically, but the Brian De Palma film Dressed to Kill sort of came into play, and Brett was kind of hung up on, like, okay, yeah, let's do something that's like, a big reference to that, like some sort of suspenseful, sexual, like psycho thriller, which to me sounded fantastic. And then over about a year, we developed the idea, and Tamron was a part of that as well. And we finally landed on two directors who go by Brewer. They're brothers. They're young, very, very bright. And they worked with Brett to sort of re-script it so that it was less an homage to Dress to Kill, and more, just something inspired by it, and also something that took advantage of the incredible setting opportunities we had. Like, because MoCA, the museum in LA, was involved, we had access to shoot in a museum, which is a Dress to Kill reference. And then we also had this amazing house in Joshua Tree in the desert. So it was kind of like, well, we have access to this incredible place. How do we how do we like write that into the story? So that kind of directed a good portion of the story as well.
All these amazing resources. Now, how do we execute
Yeah,
this?
exactly. It was cool. I mean, I was, more a bystander than anything. And for me, that was an interesting and cool experience to see, like, the creative machine with some Hollywood force behind it, put things together. Because I'm used to a much more DIY approach, especially to videos. So yeah, it was a really cool experience, and got to work with some top-notch professionals, which was cool.
Is your husband still wearing the Arthur Rimbaud shirt nowadays?
I think he may have retired it. It has like the most massive tear in the front. It like shows his entire stomach.
I heard that you get starstruck pretty easily when you meet like your idols. Have you like recently had like any of that moment like where you just got starstruck like running into someone super like
I'm trying to remember the last time it happened. Yeah, no, it happens all the time. Nothing is coming to mind just yet, but yeah, it's happened many times over. Basically, anytime I meet anybody. Um, I met Bobby Gillespie, and under very embarrassing circumstances, Ian Brown made a fool out of myself.
and Johnny Marr.
Yeah, I think I behaved. Yeah, he was there with his son. He was at an MGMT show we supported, and in Manchester, maybe. But yeah, something about him being there with a kid sort of suspended my freak out, and I was able to just talk to him like a human, which was cool. I met Patti Smith recently. She was really gracious, and I couldn't handle it. That was pretty funny. Yeah.
You've toured with like Beach House, Vampire Weekend, MGMT, and all these bands. Opening for those bands, like, what is it usually like?
Yeah, I mean, just because I've toured for so long, I've played in many bands before this band. It's pretty important to know the context of how you're going to be spending the next month, like if you're on tour with a band and you don't like them or don't respect them, that's just totally setting up for a negative experience. So yeah, I mean, the first band that took us on tour, like a significant tour, was Girls, who I was a huge fan of and didn't really know, but met and ended up having a friend who was in their band that I didn't realize. And that was really special and really taught me a lot about the touring spirit and camaraderie between, bands on the road. And Vampire Weekend, those guys are old friends of mine, so it was really them just being like, oh, sweet, you finally have your project off the ground. Like, we want to hook you up with, this huge tour, which in hindsight was maybe a bit premature for us to do such a big tour. Yeah, Beach House were really inspiring. I mean, we're label mates, but don't know them at all. And we got to know each other a little bit on that tour. And just as a fan, it's kind of, it's a special thing to glimpse that intimacy of, like, the time off the stage. But yeah, I tend to, now it's more we're in the position of, we do, small to mid-size headlining tours, and we take bands on tour supporting us. And generally it's, my goal to find a band that I love and that I think will, help the night, help make the night really good. The idea of curating a night, I think, is a lost art form, a lot of the times. And so as much control as I can get, I like to, exercise. And then also, yeah, it's like you kind of got to vet them, make sure nobody's an asshole.
Lastly, I remember when your husband's band, Crocodiles, and Sandy's band came to Philly to play at Boot and Saddle, and that was a 21 and over show. So with that said, do you have anything to say to all the under 21 Dum Dum Girls fans?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that it's so hard to do combination shows. And a lot of Well, no, in a few American cities, and then in Europe, I found it's more common that you can have a venue that is well suited for both, but just the alcohol thing is such an issue. I'm sure it makes sense for venues like liability wise, but yeah, it's a huge bummer to know that we so rarely play all ages shows. I mean, I try to find opportunities to do it, and I've tried to sort of publicize, like, if you can't get into our show, email us and we'll invite you to sound check or, stuff like that. But um, it's always really great when you get to play for younger audiences because they are not jaded yet.
That's amazing. Well, thanks so much for your time, and let's have fun tonight. I'm super fortunate.